This is an interview that I conducted with magazine editor of Wisden Cricket Monthly, Jo Harman, about English chances in the upcoming Ashes and how Australia will be looking to pair World Cup T20 success with an Ashes win. I hope you enjoy. So, what about Australia do you think England struggle with the most? Do you think it's the pitches, the conditions, the balls, or just the team in general?
I think when England teams are in Australia, one thing they've got to overcome is history as well. It's not often that England go over there and win. I was there. I was fortunate enough to be there in 2010-11 when they obviously won under Andrew Strauss and played fantastically well. But even then, I think it's worth saying that Australia side was a fairly weak Australia team that was kind of slightly coming towards the end of its most effective period. And I think England will have a tougher challenge, certainly when they're going out, or as they arrive in Australia now, than they did in 10-11. But that's not to say this Australia side has still got weaknesses. This isn't like the side of Ponting, Hayden, Langer, Warren, McGrath. Yeah. They've got a serious bowling attack, that particularly those three seamers, or Hazelwood and Cummins and Stark. And then you've got Nathan Lyon. That's a formidable attack. But there is some vulnerability in that Australian batting lineup. And I think if for England to win the series, it's probably got to be a reasonably low scoring series, because I don't fancy England's top three to make a huge runs out there, really.
No. So, yeah, like you've just said, how do you personally view England's chances this series with some of their key players not maybe performing as well as they usually do in Australia, and some of them not even playing, like Archer? How do you view the chances?
Jofra Archer's definitely a big loss. When he first came through, I think a lot of our minds kind of wandered to an Australian overseas Ashes, thinking that speed of bowling would be really useful out there on those pitches, and he'll definitely be a big loss. Albeit he hadn't necessarily nailed Test cricket in the way that he had with the white ball. So yeah, he is a big loss, and they've also lost other fast bowlers along the way, and that Ollie Stone, who's unproven, but he would have probably fancied a chance of playing a couple of tests out there on faster pitches. So we're kind of, in terms of raw pace, we're now looking at Mark Wood, really, which, he's shown, particularly in overseas tests, that he can be hugely destructive, but within there's always that question mark of injuries. It's hard to see him getting through 5 test matches in the space of 5-6 weeks. So England's attack is going to be more of a kind of, you'd say, kind of English seamers, which haven't traditionally done so well in Australia, and that's going to be tricky for them to overcome those conditions.
You're looking at Wokes and the likes of those that are just they're looking for swing, aren't they? And that's not exactly doable in Australia as easy as it is in England.
Exactly. It swings a bit early doors, but not very much and not for very long with that Kookaburra ball. So Anderson is really going to have to make early inroads. There's question marks over Anderson's, obviously not amongst his talent or his record, which is unbelievable, but at his age now, he probably can't get through 5 tests in that heat, in those conditions. So England are going to have to be very, very smart about identifying the pitches where he'll be most penetrative, and also giving a bit of rest along the way.
Yeah, well, Anderson's previously struggled in Australia in comparison to everywhere else. Do you think him and Stuart Broad will be able to keep the form that they do elsewhere and had done in the previous summer, or are we looking on your Wokeses or even your spinners towards the end to sort of break through?
Yeah, I would probably be a little bit surprised if we see Broad and Anderson line up in the same team. I think we'll probably see one or the other, with Wood playing as much as they can get out of him. And then I think the key bowler we haven't talked about yet is probably Ollie Robinson, who had a brilliant start to his Test career, got an exceptional record in his brief career so far, crucially against very high quality batsmen as well. New Zealand, India, 2 very good players.
Yeah, I was there at the last day of the Headingley Test
Oh,
where we beat India, and he was brilliant. So we're
yeah,
going to need that.
and again, yeah, talking about kind of English style bowlers, he's perhaps not the sort of bowler that you would automatically say he's going to prosper in Australia, because he's operating around kind of low 80s, even high 70s at times. But what he has shown so far is his consistency is so good. He should be effective anywhere, really. If he's hitting top of off stump as regularly as he is, doing just enough with it, and bowling from a good height, so he's getting good bounce out of the pitch, I think he'll have a good series. You know, I could be proven horribly wrong, but I think with what we've seen from him, and also not just for England, his record in county cricket is such over the last few years that he gets good players out consistently. So that'll be exciting to see. I'll be looking forward to watching him against David Warner as well, who, you know, neither take a backward step. I'm sure there'll be a bit of a few words shared there, and I imagine Warner obviously had an absolute shocker in the Ashes over here last time.
Yeah, Broad was all over him, wasn't he?
Exactly, but I think his record in Australia is outstanding. He's shown at the T20 World Cup that he's back in form at just the right time from Australia's perspective. So I think I don't think we'll be seeing him get a series of single-figure scores like he did in England. Equally, I could see Robinson have a bit of success against him. So that'll be a really good battle to keep an eye on.
Yeah, so you just touched on Warner and his form in the T20 World Cup. Do you think, without stating the obvious, Australia's like success in that, and with a lot of their Ashes players in that team, do you reckon that just dampens England's chances a lot more than it did before the tournament?
There's been a bit of chat about this in the English press over the last few days that, here we go again, Australia on the up. I don't really subscribe to that view. I think the formats are so different these days. Quite a lot of the personnel is quite different. So I don't think so. Obviously, Moran in the camp will be good, having won that tournament, but then it was always going to be pretty good heading into an Ashes series that they would definitely consider themselves big favourites for. The one impact I would say it's had most obviously is perhaps the role of Justin Langer, who was getting quite a lot of criticism in the Aussie press in the lead up to the T20 World Cup. There was this assumption that he would be leaving his role at the end of the Ashes. But now he can go into the Ashes with the T20 World Cup in his back pocket, feeling very confident. There seems to be kind of renewed team morale and kind of team bond, it seems to be. So I think all that stuff will serve them quite well. As for the actual cricket itself, I don't think it has a huge amount of bearing on what will happen in the Ashes.
Yeah. So obviously, when the original teams were announced, Ben Stokes was doing his own thing, taking a break from cricket, but now he's back in the team. How much of an impact does that have on not just his ability, but the morale of England, considering what he's done in previous tests?
I think, yeah, you're bang on. I think it's his ability and the fact that he balances the side, and it means that England would have probably been considering not playing a spinner, but with that all-rounder there, you would probably now expect a spinner to be in there, plus 3 seamers, plus Stokes. But it's always more than that with Stokes. It's that belief that whatever situation team is in, Stokes might just be able to pull you out of it. And perhaps England are guilty of relying on that too much over the years. But look, put it this way, when England walk out of the Gabba, they will feel so much more confident because Ben Stokes is walking out alongside them. And that belief is huge. And a lot of, it's a cliche, but a lot of Test cricket is played in the head.
Yeah,
it's a mental game, and England will be feeling a hell of a lot better about life with Ben Stokes walking out there. A caveat to that, he's barely played cricket. I mean, he hasn't played a game since July. Even then, obviously, he had been struggling a bit because of this finger injury that he's now hopefully overcome. So I don't think we should expect too much too soon from Stokes in this series. He will have to find his way back into form in a really pressure cooker situation. But if Ben Stokes plays 5 Test matches, as we hope he will, as England fan, it's unlikely that he won't do anything. When Stokes is around, he usually pulls something out of the bag, even if his form isn't fantastic. So, yeah, I think you can't underestimate the impact Stokes' presence will have on that England side.
Yeah, so you said, obviously, not just from the mental side, how do you think the crowds in Australia affect how England's mental side is? So obviously walking out first in the Gabba, then you've got the MCG, you've got the different sort of aspects there. How do you think that mentally affects a lot of the side, especially the opening two, who have looked a little bit flaky?
Yeah, it's certainly one of the challenges of playing in Australia is that kind of vociferous, aggressive crowd who will really get stuck into England. They love nothing better than beating the Poms. There'll be all of that stuff in the lead up to the series. And yeah, when it comes for Rory Burns, and whether it's Hamid or Crawley who walks out to join him at the Gabba, that is about as pressurised as it comes in Test cricket. What I would say though is Australian fans turn on their own quite quickly as well. That was
Yeah,
evident in certainly when I was there in 2010-11. By the end of the MCG test, or by the end of day one of the MCG test, pretty much all the Australians had left the ground. So I think so much of this is about how quickly England can get going in the series, and even if they can get out of the Gabba with a draw, then there will be doubts starting to creep into the Australian psyche as well. And I think if England play well, you can almost turn that on its head and use the crowd as an advantage. But it's no good if you're 3-0 down, the momentum continues. And we all know what it's like at the end of those Ashes tours when it's 3-4, 5-0. They're pretty miserable viewing from an English perspective.
yeah. So obviously the T20 success, you don't think that's played the biggest part. Do you think England can and are keeping the hope from Australia's poor form in Test cricket over the last year? Obviously, the India Test to the big one with losing there. Do you reckon that's something that England can hold on to as a bit of hope, while now adding the ability to the squad?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you say Australia's poor form in Test cricket; they've hardly played it really. Obviously, the last series was that India series, and I think England can take heart from that. That was, I mean, India a wonderful Test team, but that was an under-strength Test team minus Kohli, minus a lot of their bowlers.
Yeah,
India managed to pull a series win from nowhere really, and show up some of the vulnerabilities in Australia's side. So I think England can't play like India. They're very different teams. They've got different qualities, but I think they can certainly take a lot of heart from the way that series went. And going back to what I said, when India got a bit of momentum in that series, Australia found it quite hard to kind of put it back and dominate in the way you'd expect. So yeah, it's a pretty decent template. I suppose if you're looking for kind of comparisons, Rishabh Pant was obviously fantastic in that series and kind of won them the kind of crucial game. And you look at Joss Buttler, and we see it sporadically in Test cricket, but he has got the ability to play those kind of match-winning innings, and he should, in theory, enjoy playing on Australian pitches. He sometimes looks a bit susceptible against the moving ball in English conditions, but as we've talked about, there won't be a huge amount of movement on offer. He quite likes pace, the ball coming onto him. So if Butler can kind of get himself to 20-30, then he has got the ability to turn a match on its head from there. And he's probably one of the few England players you look through that lineup and say he can change the game in a session or two. His detractors would say he's not done it anywhere near enough in a Test team, and that's probably a fair comment. But we have seen moments where the chase against Pakistan in the summer before this one, he has got enough Test runs to show he can do it. And if we are saying there's any crossover in form from T20 to Test cricket, then he's looking pretty good. Although, as I said, I don't think we can take too much from it.
No. I know it's sort of your sort of cliche question, but who are the game changers on both sides? Obviously, Steve Smith had an amazing last Ashes. Took a few bumps and bruises, but he got the runs. Do you think he'll be able to carry on that form? Do you think he'll be Australia's main man again? And is it just sort of England relying on Joe Root again, like they sort of did in the summer?
Yeah, it's hard to get away from the Smith v Root battle because it is the key battle. Smith might no longer be Australia's captain, but he is still their talisman in terms of what he offers them. And England have obviously been far too reliant on Root for runs over the last year, and thankfully Root he's in the form of his life. I think Smith, I'm right in saying, is averaging 99 across his last 3 Ashes series, whereas Root is averaging kind of 44, 45 or something like that. So, no disgrace in Root's record whatsoever, but if you're matching those two up, then he is way off what Smith has been able to produce. Now, with Root's form going into this series, you would be confident that he can at least match Smith and maybe even surpass him. And as we said, Australia haven't played a lot of Test cricket, but Smith's ridiculous record has tapered off a little bit over the last kind of 18 months, enough to perhaps give England a glimmer of hope. He will undoubtedly be the prize wicket. And then you got Labuschagne as well, who obviously came again from nowhere really in that 2019 series, the first concussion substitute, comes on for Steve Smith and hasn't really looked back since. Got a really gutsy half century there and has been one of the form players in the world since then. Has also done really well in Australia. So I think it's those two at 3 and 4. I think England will fancy getting 1 or 2 early wickets. Then it's whether you can kind of get rid of Labuschagne and Smith and really get into that middle order, which there is a bit of uncertainty. You've got Cam Green, who's going to bat at 6, who's the next great batting hope. But, this is the first Ashes series. It could go either way. And then you're into Tim Payne at 7, who's a modest batsman, and then a potentially longish tail if you've got through those early wickets quickly. So there is, if you can get, and also there's the morale. As soon as you get Steve Smith out, then you just know you've saved yourself a lot of time.
Yeah,
exactly. So undoubtedly he's the man they'll be desperate to get out.
And just finally, do you have a score prediction, and how many runs is Joe Root scoring this Ashes Test?
God, all right. Well, we just did our predictions for the latest issue of Wisden Cricket Monthly. Strangely, the 2 Aussies we asked, I think they both went with 2-all. Whereas I went, that being nice because it's an English magazine. I went 3-1 Australia, which, I do think Australia will win the series. I think maybe 3-2. 3-2 would be a cracking series. We've not really had a close series in Australia a close Ashes series in Australia for a long time. And Ben Stokes, as we discussed, has given me that kind of little boost of enthusiasm. As for runs for Root, are you looking for a specific number?
No, just a ballpark on how he's going to win us the series.
Sure. Well, I think realistically, if we're going to win the series, I think Root is going to have to probably score at least 200 somewhere.
Yeah.
3 ideally. Well, I suppose ideally 5 and up. But yeah, I think we're looking at Root needs to kind of have an Alistair Cook 210-11-esque series. I can't quite remember how many runs that Cook scored in that series, but
ridiculous amount.
Yeah, we're talking about in that kind of ballpark figure. Because if you think back to that England batting lineup, fair enough, Cook scored all those runs, but everyone in that top 7 scored runs. And actually, Collingwood didn't. Collingwood was the exception. All the other players in the top 7, including Pryor at 7, got 100 in that series. With this England team, I'd be surprised if you have more than maybe 3 centurions across the series, which really puts pressure on Root to have a big series.
Well, there's a lot of pressure on the openers there, isn't there, to just stay in and grind it out to then let Root play how he wants to play, isn't it?
Absolutely, and that's going to be crucial. Even if Burns is averaging 30 coming into the series, but he stuck around there and got them through that first session, then you'd say in a way, not that you want your test open to be averaging 30, but you say in a sense that's kind of job done in a way if you can set that platform for Root and then Stokes and then Buttler to hopefully make hay in the second, third, fourth sessions.
Right, Joe, thank you very much. That's been very insightful.